Hi, everybody. My name is Christina. I'm one of the co-founder and COO at Knowtions Research. Here at Knowtions, we are figuring out how to insure the next billion people. And the way that we're doing that is using alternative data sources and machine learning to figure out how to personalize and help people buy health and life insurance instantaneously. Now, our first markets are actually all out in Asia. And the reason we chose that was really because in Asia, they don't really have an effective way of measuring risk. So they're using a lot of North American models. And for us, we're now using alternative data sources that people previously didn't use in order to have better, more precise risk predictions so that people who were previously rejected for insurance can now actually purchase insurance. Much like a great example of Pay How You Live, an early version of it is in car insurance. Today, if you buy if you download an app on your car for car insurance, many of the times you'll get discounts if you're driving well, and you're gonna get, they're gonna give you tips on how to drive better if you're not actually driving that well, right? So today, same idea, insure more people, get them connected, give them accurate risk predictions. How do we align insurance companies around keeping all of our people healthy? And that's how we're gonna insure the next billion people. So now it sounds all great and dandy that we're now insuring the next billion people, but what I really wanted to talk about today is how we got here, right? And this sounds really great, but it really has been a 6-year journey from actually our roots as a natural language processing company. And I'm hoping many people here today, you're either interested, you're working at a startup that's maybe trying to find the magical land of what we call product market fit, or you're thinking about starting your own company. I wanted to spend probably 10 minutes walking you through our journey of going from a very simple algorithm to actually finding a market that we're almost there at the almost there at the magical land of product market fit, and how long this journey took, what are some of the rabbit holes that didn't work out for us that we took, and really how you could apply that to your own journey. So like I mentioned before, we started as a natural language processing company. Back when we first started, graduated from school, when we first started, what we were essentially doing is we were taking unstructured medical text and extracting key concept from it, right? And structuring that text. And we were able to do that across multiple languages, right? And that's all we were doing. Nothing with insurance, nothing with any of that. So the most natural actually use case of that, believe it or not, was actually language translation. So we thought we would, this is before Google Translate had their neural translate and whatnot, we thought we would do humans editing on top of machine translations in the medical space. And that's what we thought our company was going to do. So we went down that route, and it didn't work out for us. And what we really discovered was that translation is what we call a department of a department problem, right? It really wasn't solving where that pain point was. And so that leads us to our first pivot, right, on our journey to finding product market fit. The second thing we thought we could do is, okay, we have this amazing algorithm that structures text. Okay, now if you look at all data in Asia, it's pretty much all unstructured data. So you can't actually do a lot of the really complicated machine learning models on it that you can in North America, right? So maybe we apply our machine learning models to structure what we call dark data. We marketed it as dark data back in the day. And then we help these biomedical or pharmaceutical companies actually be able to analyze data and whatnot. So that was our second pivot. And that's actually what we raised our pre-series A on, right? This idea that there's this huge store of unstructured data in all parts of the world that's not North America, that's not being used. We have an algorithm to unlock it and be able to analyze it, right? And now, where am I going with this? My point is, and my partner, my co-founder actually says this a lot, when a door closes, a window will always open. And you just gotta find where that window is. And the way that you do that is really, we talked a little bit on my previous talk, is by zoning in on the ROI, right? Today, if you're thinking about starting your own company, or you're thinking about, you have this machine learning thing, it's going to be really, really awesome. The reality of most machine learning companies is that you're going to be doing a lot of bloody custom work in the beginning. You're not going to have a ready-to-go product that's going to hit the market and do really, really great on day zero. You might be one of the lucky ones, one of the brilliant ones, but if you're lucky, like, that could happen to you, but most likely you're going to have to do the hard grind of actually finding the process of finding product market fit. So for us, that's where we actually got to. We kept on focusing, what do we do to actually figure out that insurance was a sweet spot? We asked ourselves one question, and we kept laser focused on that one concept, and that is, where is the ROI for the client, right? Is this ROI of whatever analysis we're doing enough for them, right? And then what we really discovered was, back then we were trying to figure out, okay, we can use lots of health, lots of biomedical data, analyze it, who are we driving the most ROI for? And lo and behold, that's when we ended up in insurance companies, right? So when we ended up in insurance companies, we realized that this is a place by which you can drive actually the most amount of ROI, because they don't have enough data, especially in Asia. They didn't have that much data. It was a really good place to start driving that ROI for them, right? And that's how we became an insurtech company. We did not start as an insurtech company. We actually started as a natural language processing company. And it's through this process of focusing on where the ROI is, iterating on top of what didn't work, that we actually went and became a service provider for insurance companies, right? And when we first started in insurance companies, what we actually found was that what was actually really special about us was, ironically enough, two things. The first thing was our ability to use unstructured data. These companies had no idea how to use these multilingual unstructured data. So the fact that we actually had our algorithms early on in our journey actually really helped us differentiate ourselves and be really, really competitive in the market. And the second thing was our ability to use external data. So during one of our rabbit holes, we were trying to actually tap into data stores of healthcare data that were available in Asia but not widely used yet, figure out how we're going to access them in a way that actually protects privacy and does all of those things, and make those insights able to be used, right? So in that journey, we collected lots of partners that actually, in the end, really helped with our sales process into the insurance company, right? So it's really this whole process of going from starting an idea. If you're planning on starting your own startup, you're probably going to have not a fully formed idea yet, constantly iterating on what it means to actually serve your clients, being laser focused on that ROI, and actually just admitting when the ROI you're driving for the client isn't good enough, right? Because that allows you to actually figure out where that pain point is, and allows you to actually get deeper and deeper into the market. So ultimately you can find this magical land of product market fit. And bluntly put, here at Notions, I would say it took us about 4 to 5 years, and we're still in that iterative process. It's so deeply entrenched into our genetics that we actually essentially made it one of our values, and that is be clear on the real problem and solve it pragmatically. And here at Notions, we actually call ourselves the underdogs, in the sense that we're just those people who just won't quit. And we'll keep on iterating and keep on iterating and keep on iterating until we get it. So that's our very quick and short story of Notions, how we started, the journey that took us to become an insurance company, with our first insurance product actually launching next year, to that. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions? What are you preparing to launch for launch next year? We're actually launching, so essentially what we do is we use alternative data to make generate a health score that essentially encompasses the health of a person. And we're actually launching an insurance product that has that health score as part of the personalization and recommendation engine. So that's a brand new insurance product that's actually going to launch in the Taiwan market next year. So that's really exciting for us. Yeah, cool. do you plan on expanding outside of the insurance industry to utilize the NLP technologies you have developed? Really, really neat question. So we went reverse in that we tried to use the NLP technology in multiple healthcare industries before we ended up on insurance, actually. So we've already gone down the route of quite a few, to name them. Clinical trial matching, pharmaceutical, so post-market research, research validation. We've gone down the route of, what else have we done? Bioscience, just research, actually parsing out a lot of those things. For now, we're laser focused on insurance, so we don't see ourselves moving past this industry just yet. But right now, we don't actually even sell our NLP technology as a separate standalone. It's actually just a full suite thing. It's a competitive advantage that we give to our clients, that we can work with data that no other companies can. Was it ending? Follow-up question. From your opinion, when got enough data, can one feed KPI to a neural net model to predict a KPI? I could be misunderstanding this question, but the way that I'm predict Rock, can one feed KPIs to predict the ROI? Hold on. What do you mean by that? Do you mean whether or not if I have, I can predict the success of an ROI, like predict the success or how well a model will perform? If the question is whether or not I can actually give any KPI to a machine learning model just to see the odds of how well our models would perform against that KPI, I'm inclined to say no, simply because although the use case, an example of fraud, we're all predicting fraud, but client data is so different that in the end, it actually required quite a bit of custom tuning, right? So as a result, there's less, I would argue that there's less generalizability across different KPIs. I'm not sure if I quite answered the question, Paul. You can try rephrasing it one more time and see if I get a better grasp of it. All right, Michelle, how many data scientists are on your team? Do you forecast degradation in your models? How will you manage new influx of data when the products launch next year? How many data scientists on our team? We have 15 to 20 data science. We actually combine data science and machine learning engineering and machine learning researchers all together. So about 15, our team is growing upwards to 20. Do you forecast degradation in your models? Does that mean, when you say that, do you mean whether or not our models actually slowly decrease in performance over time because there's new model? I'm assuming that's what you mean. And so for us, we would have timed retraining, right? So if any sort of changes happen, whether if it's fraud, you need to detect new patterns, or the client now is collecting new data, or like there's now new features, there's lots of other things. Essentially, when we actually sell it as a SaaS, we essentially include retraining as a part of that, given the client doesn't actually make major changes or whatnot. Cool. Anybody here who's looking to start their own startup? Anybody? Have you ever considered applying within the medical? That space is actually quite crowded, and the leading company, and I forgot, Nuance, that's what they're called. So Nuance is one of the leaders in that space in terms of medical transcribing. We did consider it at the time, but our technology for transcribing, you need audio to text. That's not exactly what our algorithms did. What our algorithms did was actually, I guess you could use free-form doctor's notes to fill out essentially like medical forms or whatever that is more structured, and pick it out and do that. But this is one of those things where you have to actually figure out where that ROI is, right? So a lot of the times, like, could we do it? Yeah. Will we do it? probably not. Do you ever run it when doctors use different types to describe? Oh yeah, totally. Even diabetes, 6 different ways. And essentially we call it the many-to-one matching. And it is an active problem set that we're doing. So the way that we deal with it, it's actually proprietary. We just got a patent for it actually. It's called text to node. Essentially we're picking out key text, like I said, key entities of it. And we actually do some super magical machine learning stuff that I wish Kieran, who was part of our last session, was here, because he'd be able to give a much better explanation than I could. Actually maps into a node, which is like an embedding. So that actually makes the process of mapping many different ways of referring to the same thing, to the same entity, much, much better and much, much higher quality. And on top of that, we do actually create really high training data from human annotations. And the way we do that is actually a legacy from very early on in our startup days. We have a community of bilingual PhDs, biomedical PhDs, who used to edit over our actually machine translation text, and now they actually create training data for us, which is really cool. But anyways, yeah. We did not, Michelle. I'm counting down earlier regarding AI doctors. No, we did not. From managing team, what's been your biggest learning from managing teams? From technical to business to customers? It's a really, really good question. It's a good question because the biggest is always the hardest, because you're constantly like, oh, it is so dark in here. But I can tell you what I learned last week, actually. So what we learned last week is what I actually shared earlier in the ROI conversation, which was, hey, look, when you're managing business and technical teams, when you're business people, they're going to sell something that is probably 6 to 8 months ahead of your technical teams. And when they come back with an ROI, and your tech team is trying to get explicit answers from the business team, mostly because they need to pick and choose how to allocate their resources within short timelines in order to actually optimize for one thing. So for example, if you're tuned your models to optimize for one thing, it must match the KPI. You can't all of a sudden ask them to do something else, right? And the learning from that is essentially that when you're thinking about a KPI, you must have different versions of it, right? At least internally, you must have fail safes in terms of KPIs in case you cannot meet the first KPI. And with clients, let me tell you, you can always change KPIs as long as it's reasonable, right? But internally, if you're putting everybody onto a death march to reach the first one or die, that's not good. And that's actually maybe not necessarily the biggest, but the freshest, which is like last week or 2 weeks old for me. And biggest is just too much. It changes every week, I feel like. That's the beauty of a startup. If you're interested in starting your own company or working at a startup, you literally have troubles like answering questions. What was your biggest mistake? What was your biggest learning? Primarily because your biggest mistake, you're making mistakes every single freaking day. So you can't answer your biggest mistake. You can only answer the question, what was your worst mistake last week? You can answer that question, but the biggest, oh, that one is hard. Like you have to time frame that. There's only like local bads. There's not even a maximum bad anymore. Oh, sorry, that's my cat. He tried to steal my makeup bag and it spilled all over him and he ran out. That's what the sound was. How do I manage my time? That's a great question. So Notions is actually super unique because we have a team out in Asia. So it's very tough. It's a 12-hour time difference. It's a physical thing. What can you do, right? So what we do is Mondays and Tuesdays, Team Taiwan does evenings. Wednesdays and Thursdays, we do evenings, which means we actually have 2 shifts. Like most people in Toronto get off at 6, and then we're actually back again at like 9 p.m. to sometimes midnight. And I love my team. They're amazing, but it just became a part of it. And every single time a person actually gets onboarded, it is something that we're really, really upfront about. It's a unique opportunity because you get to work with Asian clients. You get a completely new, different data set. It comes with this, but at the same time, you have this little bit of a balance issue. You have to be really committed in order to be able to do this. And as to how I manage my time, I was just sharing this with a couple members of my team today, in that I have a pretty, I would say, like rigorous morning schedule, in that I wake up about 6:30. I meditate for about 30 minutes, and I actually do my chores in the morning, because I have absolutely no energy after work to do anything productive. Like, I'm just like actually dead, right? So from like 8 to about like 8, like from 7, I would say, to about 8:30, 9-ish, that's like my personal time to take care of like life chores and whatnot. And I typically start work at like 9, 9:30, and then try to end probably like 5:36, take a break, and then most times we're back on at 9 again. So it is quite stressful, but that's a startup. Like, you signed up for this. You kind of embrace the suck, right? Cool. Anyone have any with remote work? I presume it was less of a transition due to COVID. With remote work, so that's actually really interesting. I feel like the amount of empathy in our team has actually multiplied since COVID, actually, because Taiwan used to be, or Asia used to be, like more of the remote team. And essentially, when you're with each other all the time, you take a lot of things actually for granted, right? You take those, like getting coffee together, 5 minutes information passing, you take it for granted. And now all of a sudden, when we went remote and people didn't have that, Slack was more active, people were more self-organized, people were documenting more, people were literally trying to actually get on each other, like connect with each other more. So I wouldn't say it's a transition. I would totally say that the team actually built a lot more empathy for each other, and that I thought was overall a really good thing for the team. But do I miss them? Absolutely. Having your team located in do you find any issues with data security or HIPAA compliance? So interesting issue again. So for us, the way that we handle it is, so this is actually like both a challenge that only our team face, because for us, all of our machine learning software is actually deployed on-premise in the client's environment. Right? So what ends up happening, and this is like a super challenging thing that my team is absolutely amazing for overcoming, in that only the people on the ground, and they go through really strict security protocols, like they can't actually take anything out, they can't do anything, right? That they actually essentially go in physically to the client's environment to do things. So, hey Karen, so essentially they're not able to actually take the data out. So our modeling teams actually a lot of the times have to guess, right? I think they can't actually see the data, and they rely on the expertise of our on-the-ground machine learning engineers to bring that back. So it is a super interesting thing. And some of the ways that the client actually helps us go over this is they have their own portals, they have a lot of things. Kieran is saying hello, so he'd be able to share a lot more of this, but there's multiple ways that we actually work with our clients together to be able to ensure these data security stuff, so that data actually never leaves the client's premises. Currently founding and building observability monitoring tool. Still hard to convince ML teams at this moment. How do you think ML ops software will change in the coming years? And what would be your advice for us? Finding a ML monitoring tool, still hard to convince ML teams at the moment. ML ops software. So Kieran is here, so I feel like he's much better. Maybe he can type the response to actually on whether the ML ops software will change in the coming years. I can tell you, like, in terms of convincing them, you must convince them, like, what's different about your tool? Like, what do you do differently that they weren't able to do before? How do you actually change their workflow, right? So again, like what I said in my last ROI talk, convincing any team, including the machine learning team, goes into actually mapping out their workflow, right? So if you were to come into a startup like ours, bluntly put, a lot of our workflows are still, bluntly put, rather ad hoc. And that's a situation in most smaller companies. Why? Because you're optimizing for client delivery, you're optimizing for speed, you're optimizing for getting things up and running, you're optimizing for testing things. You're not going to have the most perfectly implemented workflow. So it's going to be difficult for you, but it's still the same idea. You got to get the basic workings and figure out your monitoring tool. Where is your monitoring tools and ML DevOps actually going to go? How are you serving these machine learning engineers and making their life easier? What are they doing that's like super, super, super repetitive right now that your tool is going to actually help them solve? And in this example, maybe one thing would be if you were able to detect certain things, you can detect certain things as like a few hours earlier or whatnot. How would it actually help them? So that's where I would go. But Kieran, he just replied he would definitely be the right person to talk about this. He's going to give you be able to give you a lot more insight than I would be able to do. Do you see your product helping Canadian insurance companies too? So right now we're laser focused on actually Asia because that's where the growth market is. So we're not, maybe in the future, you never know, the road is long, but right now at this very moment, we're laser focused on there. Since you said a lot of teams work only at the client, do you think there can be problems when scaling up? Great question. And I wish Fred, who is our CIO, and he's like a veteran insurance company, he's been running he was their chief architect at MetLife for the last 10, 20 years. This is actually top of mind for him. So really great question. How do we actually scale back resources as we get more comfortable and more experienced deploying to our clients, right? So will we face problems? Probably, absolutely. It's what we eat for dinner at a startup, right? But how are we going to actually solve it? You're going to find the right people to solve it. And I'm really, really proud that I do think we have the right person with the right experience set and the right type of innovation mindset to really think about how to do a lot of these things. Cool. Faraz, are we all good to rock and roll? Any other questions? All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope this was helpful. And for those of you, Martin, who's like getting started on your startup journey, for everybody else thinking about venturing into the dark side, we have cookies. Like, add oils. You're going to be great. All right. See you, everybody.